And she said, "You can believe what you want, but that doesn't make it the truth." Darla Evans. Some people crave attention more than anything. They crave it to the detriment of themselves and others. Some want it so bad, they'll hurt themselves, make up illnesses, and fake symptoms just so people will ask about their well-being. Others are twisted enough that they'll inflict pain and sickness upon those in their care so they can be pitied and given the attention they desire. It comes from friends, family, strangers, medical personnel, anyone who will listen to the fake symptoms and fabricated problems the caregiver decides their ward has. These people have the rarely diagnosed mental disorder known as Munchausen by proxy. Our villain today was never formally diagnosed with the disorder, but after listening to the case, you can be the judge. Born on October 16, 1987, Lacey Spears grew up in Decatur, Alabama. From a young age, she knew she had a love for children and caring for people. As soon as she was able, she started babysitting, and then eventually worked her way up to a daycare. She was a shy young woman around adults, but she was great with children. Through the daycare, Lacey met Shauna Lynch. Shauna said Lacey was always willing to look after her kids and that they loved her. It was a great relationship at first. After a few years, Shauna started to think Lacey was becoming too involved with her family and stopped spending as much time with her. She was real clingy. It seemed she never wanted to be by herself. She always had to have a kid there. Somebody's kid. Lacey befriended Christy Burnham under similar circumstances. They grew close at junior college while Lacey was taking some nursing courses. She would eventually drop out, but stayed friends with Christy and always extended her help to the single mom. Unfortunately, Christy's trust in Lacey would dwindle after hearing some unusual stories and experiencing her own strange encounter. When attending church, a lady said to her, "Oh, that's Cameron. You've got Lacey's baby." Confused and upset by the exchange, Christy corrected the woman. Lacey was adamant that she never claimed Christy's child as hers, but she would soon find herself with a baby of her own. During a brief relationship with her neighbor, Chris Hill, Lacey found herself pregnant. She pushed Chris away, but claimed he never wanted anything to do with the baby. She would give birth to Garnett-Paul Thompson Spears on December 3, 2008, and was more than thrilled to raise him on her own. But Garnett was a sickly baby. For the first 9 weeks of his life, he was in and out of hospitals with a variety of ailments. Primarily, his inability to keep food down and projectile vomiting prevented him from gaining weight. Due to this, doctors diagnosed Garnett with a failure to thrive. No one could figure out the cause of the baby's stomach problems. When Garnett was just 9 weeks old, he underwent stomach surgery to prevent him from vomiting. Unfortunately, the boy took a turn for the worse and was airlifted from Decatur General Hospital to Birmingham Children's Hospital. They discovered that his sodium level was dangerously high. Normal levels are between 135 and 145 milliequivalents per liter. Garnett's was 166. High sodium levels can be deadly, causing seizures and brain swelling. Though doctors were unable to determine how Garnett's sodium level got so high, they were able to bring it back down. Once the boy was stable and well, Lacey took him home. She didn't stay away from the doctor's office long, however. Claiming Garnett wasn't eating, that she couldn't get him to eat, Lacey continued to seek answers. At only 9 months old, Garnett underwent his second surgery, this time to insert a G-tube. This feeding tube would allow nutrients to pass directly into Garnett's stomach. According to Lacey, doctors were hopeful that, with time, Garnett wouldn't have so many problems eating. But this was not the case. During all of these trials and tribulations, Lacey started a mommy blog to chronicle her son's health struggles. She was lonely and craved the attention of the online strangers who would commiserate with her situation. In 2010, Lacey informed her friends she wanted to leave Alabama. So she did. Packing up her life and her son, Lacey moved them to Florida, where she could be near her grandmother. While there, she babysat, cleaned houses, and received some public assistance to keep them afloat. On occasion, Lacey and Garnett would return to Alabama for a visit. During one such visit, Shauna Lynch, Lacey's former friend, claimed Garnett was behaving like a normal 2-year-old. He was running around, energetic, and eating pizza. According to Lacey, Garnett could eat, but then sometimes he wouldn't, claiming his stomach hurt and he didn't want to eat anything. These were the times Lacey would use Garnett's feeding tube. She would say she only used it for supplemental feeding and nutrition. As Garnett neared school age, Lacey decided it was time to move again, this time to Chestnut Ridge, New York. She wanted him to get the best education he could and decided they would find that in New York. A friend told Lacey about a community called The Fellowship, which was a place where elderly and disabled people could live among their caregivers. The workers received free room and board and schooling for their children. Lacey thought this would be the ideal place to raise her son. Lacey seemed to thrive in her own right. She loved her new job, caring for the elderly, and she loved that Garnett was able to run around freely and safely. The only issue she had was when people asked her about Garnett's father. Instead of telling people the truth, she gave everyone a story about police officer Blake. He was a fictional man who died in a car accident. This seemed like yet another way for Lacey to garner the sympathy of others. Fellowship member Valerie Plosh met Lacey and Garnett in 2012 after they moved to the community. She said that, despite Lacey's stories of her son's sickly nature, Garnett seemed normal and healthy. According to Valerie, the boy was very friendly and knew how to make people smile. She also said he was often hungry and would eat the fruit and nuts she kept on the counter. It seemed that Lacey had a strong, loving relationship with her son. Despite the new environment and seemingly happy and healthy Garnett, Lacey claimed the boy still suffered stomach issues. She brought him to more doctors. Pediatric gastroenterologist Dr. Ivan Derenkov saw Garnett 5 times, starting in 2013. To him, Garnett seemed like a perfectly healthy child. One topic he discussed with Lacey was the removal of Garnett's feeding tube. She agreed to a battery of complicated tests to rule out serious diseases. But her attitude changed when the idea of a nutritional evaluation was brought up. The test would determine if Garnett's tube was still necessary. But at this suggestion, Lacey neither agreed nor disagreed. Lacey said in a later interview that neither she nor the doctor were comfortable with the idea of removing the tube and that it was a goal for the future. However, Dr. Derenkov said he didn't like the tube being there if it wasn't necessary and would tell Lacey this each time they met. He had also asked to see Garnett's previous medical records, but never received them. Dr. Derenkov moved on to practice in a different state and never saw Garnett again. But the case continued to bother him. There were a variety of red flags that made him suspect Munchausen by proxy. Unfortunately, he was never certain enough to report his suspicions. Dr. Mary Sanders, a clinical psychologist and clinical professor at Stanford University, reviewed Lacey's interviews and saw plenty of red flags as well. Garnett's symptoms never fit Lacey's story, and he was usually willing to eat. His feeding tube was easy to sabotage, as it was simple to inject anything into it. And Lacey loved the attention and sympathy she received from her copious blog posts about her son's condition. For 1.5 years, Lacey and Garnett lived at the Fellowship. The boy was apparently thriving, behaving like a happy child. Shortly after Garnett's 5th birthday, things sadly took a turn for the worse. He came down with a fever, stomach ache, and headache. His pediatricians could not figure out what was happening. After a while, he seemed to be improving, but then several days later, he deteriorated again. Lacey claims he was screaming in pain and holding his head. He would be admitted to Nyack Hospital with seizure-like symptoms. With Lacey's consent, a video electroencephalogram, or EEG, was set up with a special cap wired to a machine to monitor Garnett's brain activity. They also set up a camera to record the boy's room. Lacey was, understandably, glued to Garnett's side. Under the close watch of doctors, Garnett's condition improved greatly. But then, 2 days after his admittance, Garnett's condition declined once again. His stomach issues and pain returned. He was screaming that his head hurt, and he kept trying to throw up. It got bad enough that he was unable to breathe, and the staff called a code blue. When Garnett was first admitted to Nyack, his sodium level was a normal 138. It had risen to a near-lethal 182. Doctors decided his best chance of survival was to transfer him to the Children's Hospital at Westchester Medical Center. When a nurse contacted a doctor at the center about the transfer, he was astonished at the number given, saying a sodium level of 182 was impossible. Regardless, they were once again able to bring the level back down. But by this point, the damage had been done. 2 days after being admitted to the Children's Hospital, Garnett was declared brain dead and put on life support. Suspecting Lacey had something to do with her son's decline, doctors called now-retired Detective Dan Carfey to start an investigation. While he focused on the events at the hospital, detectives Kirk Budnick and Greg Dunn acquired and executed a search warrant for Lacey's home. Detective Budnick searched the kitchenette and discovered a variety of medicine bottles tucked behind a big can of salt on the table. In the living room, Dunn discovered a bag of something hanging from an IV pole. It appeared to be breast milk, and as Lacey told detectives she was breastfeeding, he left it alone. A similar bag found in the trash was also left behind. The detectives took over 150 items from Lacey's home, including food, salt containers, medicines, tubes, and syringes. During the investigation, Lacey was overly cooperative. Instead of staying with her son like a distressed parent would, she wanted to spend time with the detectives. She would even bring them people to interview. Lacey would later make the claim that she was denied time with her son so that the detectives could question her. After Garnett was put on life support, Lacey contacted Valerie to relay the news. Having come to adore the boy, she was devastated. Lacey asked her to dispose of the feeding bag hanging on the IV pole in the living room, and as Valerie wanted to help the grieving mother, she went to do so without question. However, after a neighbor told Valerie that police had been to Lacey's, she instead brought the feeding bag home. Initially, she put it in the trash, but something inside her told her to keep it, so she moved it to a closet. After informing the leaders at the Fellowship of Events, someone came and collected the bag and handed it over to the police. Detectives returned to Lacey's home and retrieved the second bag. Both feeding bags were sent off for testing, and the results were more disturbing than surprising. Each bag contained the equivalent of nearly 70 small salt packets, or about 35 grams, a lethal amount. 2 days after Garnett's brain swelled, the 5-year-old was taken off life support and declared dead. During the investigation, Lacey's manipulative nature came to light. The detectives spoke with Chris Hill, who said he would have loved to be part of Garnett's life. Lacey had threatened him so that he would stay away from her and their son. They found the numerous social media posts Lacey made building up the persona of police officer Blake, the fictitious father to her son. When Garnett's medical records were subpoenaed, it revealed that over the course of 2 years, they visited 20 different doctors, some of which were referrals. Detectives suspected that Lacey would move from doctor to doctor when one got too close to figuring out what she was doing. Over the years, calls had been made to child service agencies, but none were ever properly investigated. 5 months after Garnett's death, Lacey was arrested, charged with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter, and held without bail. When the trial began in February 2015, Lacey's lawyers David Sachs and Stephen Riebling insisted that Garnett's death was a medical mistake caused by Nyack Hospital. They would claim the change in his diet exacerbated his stomach problems, and there was a lack of proper medication to combat the dehydration caused by the sodium in his IV solutions. The prosecution played recordings from Garnett's room showing Lacey took her son out of the camera's view 17 times. During 2 trips to the bathroom, Lacey was seen with parts of Garnett's feeding tube. She claimed she was cleaning them. Garnett became noticeably more ill after those bathroom visits. The first time, he required the attention of a nurse. Then, 30 minutes after the second trip, he was thrashing on his bed and gagging. In just 5 hours, Garnett's sodium level went from 138 to 182, which cannot happen naturally. Garnett's pediatrician at Nyack Hospital said that Lacey had a little smile on her face when the blood results showed a spike in sodium level. Lacey's computer was searched, and it showed she had done internet searches about high sodium and the effects of salt on a person. She claimed it was done to better understand her son's condition and what was happening to him. When the prosecution brought up the feeding bags found in Lacey's home, her defense countered that they could have been tampered with. The bags had been in someone else's possession for over 24 hours, and that person could easily have filled them with salt. Munchausen by proxy was never mentioned. A friend of Lacey's was interviewed by the press during the trial. She said she never once saw the woman cry, even when they were playing distressing videos of Garnett flailing and falling unresponsive. 1 month after the trial began, Lacey Spears was found guilty of depraved indifference murder of a child. Her lawyers believed the jury didn't understand what verdict they gave because, to them, Lacey did not have complete disregard for her son. In April 2015, Lacey was sentenced to 20 years to life. Judge Robert Neary said, "One does not have to be a psychologist to realize you suffer from a mental illness known as Munchausen by proxy. Do you even realize the magnitude of your crime? By not imposing the maximum sentence, I'm combining punishment with something you really did not exhibit toward your son, namely, mercy." Lacey Spears will be eligible for parole in 2034 at the age of 46. Was Lacey a doting mother wrongly accused? Or did her need for sympathy and attention push her to filicide?